Jai Ma. So we continue, or rather, this is the last part of Collected Works of the Mother, Volume 9, which are her last conversations in the playground. 1958, this was the last conversations. After that, the mother did not come to the playground for talks, and of course, as I said, people interacted with her, and that's a different collection altogether. So we can see here that there is a kind of urgency because supermind has begun to manifest in 56, and humanity is not ready. So it creates another kind of difficulty. And last time we read that if humanity is not ready, several places we see Sri Aurobindo cautioning about it. And he says if humanity doesn't accept or is not ready, then still that supreme will manifest. But who knows, bypassing humanity. So God has plan B, plan C, all of them ready. And I have often wondered, evolution in water has been arrested at a point of time, even mammalian evolution. And if man refuses completely his fate, so it's not that divine will not manifest, it'll manifest, but it'll find its own ways, its own means, and all of that is possible. And we read last time that there is a section of humanity which is, Mother says, abortive attempt at being human. It's perverse and it is bound to collapse. And who will be saved, who will be lifted up? We see these cryptic sentences. Sometimes, for instance, in the Bible, the meek and the weak shall inherit the earth. It's a way of saying that those who are of simple heart, and we see here also there is a passage which we may not read, but it's on, I think, page 310 of Collected Works of Volume 9, where she describes who will be the first to respond. So the first to respond, and we see this in all the Leelas, when Rama comes, who are the first to respond? It's very strange. Sometimes in a storyline there is an aside which we miss out. For example, it's not the Rishi Muni except Agast Rishi and couple of others. Vishwamitra, they knew his mission and they helped. Agast Rishi helped him even with weapons. For many of us, Agast Rishi is Sri Aurobindo in his previous, one of his births. So, but many of the sages and saints, they don't accompany him. Many even doubt about his avatarhood. Even Shabri, they laugh at her that, oh, you're waiting for the Redeemer. There is nothing like that. But who accompanies? The monkeys, the apes, those with a simple heart, the forest dwellers. Actually, they were Vanvasis, so they responded to him automatically. Same we see during the time of Krishna, that those Gwal Bal, they spontaneously respond. So the way to enter this supramental life is through a psychic emotion. This is something which is so important, and the mother speaks of it here. Let me see if I can get to the page. We can just start with that. Rather than, and she says that the error we make is we think that because it's supramental, therefore we have to go through the mental processes. But rather, in fact, several places she has hinted that many of the faculties of the mind will not be useful for entry, just like the vitality of the animal life will not be very useful for the human mind to develop. In fact, that has to be dropped. That she has explained. So mind has to be quietened. So that is something very interesting we'll see. I have noticed this in Sri Aurobindo movement, if I may call it, that all over the world, the people with a simple heart, with a kind of psychic sense instantly, they get connected with Sri Aurobindo. Whereas those with the intellectual orientation, scholarly bent of mind, they find it a lot more difficult. Of course, they get engaged because Sri Aurobindo, if you look at him, even intellectually, it's like a mountain, Himalaya of Himalayas. But the straight way is through a psychic feeling. She says that, and like we read last time, she says, however, if the intellectual man gets turned, he becomes a very powerful instrument. So both things are there. If one goes through that and yet can arrive at that complete faith, and we see in the life, Sri Aurobindo himself is a standing example. He was an agnostic. We see this in the life of Swami Vivekananda. We see this in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was Nimai Pandit. He used to argue with many people. And suddenly when he turned, look at, Sri Aurobindo calls him as the Ansha Avatar. So, one of the conversation, then another thing very interesting, she says that, well, human beings, between the human and the supramental, there will be many steps and stages. It's like any evolutionary process, and very fascinating if you study it from the point of view of past evolutions. Like, for instance, Vanara. Sri Aurobindo says that Vanara is not an ape. Vanara is the ape-like man. And he writes in records of yoga. And he describes the stages between that humanity and this human which has come. Science also describes that there have been 9 subtypes of subhuman or pro-human prototypes which have all gone away. Some of the names we know, Cro-Magnon, we must have read it, Neanderthals, Australopithecus, all these before Sapiens erectus, which is what we are, came into being. And so these subspecies prepare something for the future and then they wash away. This is how I feel sometimes about our modern generation. Because of the evolutionary boost, suddenly we'll see that they behave in ways which are a bit crazy. But actually this is a process that some of them you'll see developed in one dimension. Then another next generation will come, it'll develop some other aspect. And then some other aspect. And then when the time is ready to assimilate all of them, maybe a few hundred years, then all these will be assimilated and taken up in the new species. That's how new species come. So this to be expected, and we have to live with and understand many crazy things which are bound to happen, because the norms are going to be broken. The human normal will no more be the normal. So this is what we have to understand, reckon with. So she speaks about these intermediate species. It can be ascertained with some certainty that there will be an intermediate specimen between the mental and the supramental being. She uses the word specimen. Of course, many of us are specimens. But specimen is not a specie. That's the interesting part. Specimen is always like namuna. Kisko bolte hain? Somebody who is odd. So this word is a very interesting. Specimen. He is not exactly like a human. I mean, we don't use that word because we don't have that concept. At the same time, we don't know where to put such a person. So there will be intermediate specimen between the mental and the supramental being. A kind of Superman. So people often ask, what is Superman? So Mother is defining Superman. That's why this is so interesting. A kind of Superman who will still have the qualities and in part the nature of man. That is, who will still belong in his most external form to the human being with its animal origin, but will transform his consciousness sufficiently to belong in his realization and activity to a new race, a race of Supermen. So this word has been used in many different ways. The first use that Sri Aurobindo does of Superman is that when human evolution takes place, it evolves along 2 lines, the Daivik type and the Asuric type. So Asura is also a Superman in the sense his capacities are more than human. But he says that's a dangerous line. So that kind of Supermanhood is where he aggrandizes his ego, which is what we see in the life of Ravan. So there have been efforts of nature to go beyond the human limits. So he has managed to tie up all these Graha Nakshatra, meaning thereby the subtle forces that we fate. But that kind of Supermanhood is destined to collapse. That's the word Superman which was picked up by Nietzsche and our Hitler, not our Hitler, but Hitler. So nevertheless, that Supermanhood, and it's a play of nature. Nature tries to rush beyond its possibilities. So it creates such amazing beings like Alexander. He used to believe that he is a Devaputra. And the man, like at 36, 37, half conquered. Of course, he believed he has conquered the world. But that's because they didn't have probably a proper cartography that time. So he came right up to India. Of course, from India he was repelled back. But to travel all the way from Greece. So these kind of asuric supermen have been there. But the true Superman has the Davic qualities. So Davic qualities, when we look at them very closely, so there is a human touch in that. And Shubindu describes it very beautifully, that the Deva, he acts very powerfully, but he's always full of that inner serenity, peace, joy, freedom. This is his way of approaching life. Whereas Asura is full of revolt, somebody who doesn't feel he is great unless he suppresses others, controls others, dominates their will, dominates their thought. This is how the Asura reacts, that, thought control of others by various means. Like we know nowadays, much of social media is about thought control. We don't even realize. And it's not about, you may have freedom of speech, but you don't have freedom of thought, because you're flooded with information, which is now with AI. Thought control will become a lot more easier because it studies the algorithms, posts things, and many of the youngsters who are not taught to think for themselves, they suddenly fall prey. So all this game will go on, but we have to move along the lines of the Davic Superman, which means love, strength, wisdom, compassion, all the beautiful qualities that we find in chapter 16 of the Gita, Devasuri Sampada. So she says they will have partly, the mother says, nature of man, but in his external being, he will be like a human being. So there would be certain animal impulses, tendencies, not a complete conquest, but a march towards conquering the animality and the animal reactions. So this will be one. Then later on, she also speaks of Superman consciousness. So that is in 69, where she says, this not yet here. So 69, she says the Superman consciousness has descended, and she describes it as the benevolent. It brings that benevolence, it brings compassion and wideness. Two characteristics are wideness and benevolence. And then she says something very interesting. The Superman will become a mentor to the body and those in whom the Superman consciousness will get activated. This Superman will find the way to the transmutation of the physical into the supramental being. So there will be a kind of guide, mentor, which will automatically, those who are evolved enough to embody the Superman consciousness, so automatically it will help transmute the body towards, how it will help is very easy, it's simple to understand. For instance, now we have all these complicated things about diet. But this consciousness will automatically lead us to the right kind of things in the body, right kind of, not habits, but movements, gestures, everything. So it will lead us towards that ultimately physical transmutation. So here she says, this specie may be considered a transitional species. So it will not, this Superman is not going to be forever. For one can foresee that it will discover the means of producing new beings without going through the old animal method. What a future science is predicted. Shobindra speaks of this in 1949 in Essays on the Supramental Manifestation. And he hints at it. Perhaps it was too early to give all the details, but Shobindra has given hints somewhere. Few places. One of them is where in his evening conversations, casually mentions science will discover how to create life in matter when it knows how life precipitated and became matter. Now they are trying the other way around. How by combining elements in matter you can create life. You can't do that. It will always be a substitute life. But when we understand how life became matter, then we will be able to create material beings. Mother has actually done it. There was a being of the world, of the higher worlds or the subtle worlds, whom she gave a body almost physical. And for 6 months, she says that he could remain in the earth atmosphere. He could even... he went to China to create revolution. All this mother describes. So, a lot of things are going on behind the scene which we don't understand. There is an experience of the mother where she goes to a place where there is a huge laboratory of sort, where several things are happening, buildings are happening. There is a mud in which she sees Purani ji taking a bath, this after his physical withdrawal, that he's taking a bath in that mud where the new creation is being formed. And then, she goes to see Sri Aurobindo because everybody is trying to tell her something. She says, I am not interested. I mean, to meet Sri Aurobindo. So Sri Aurobindo is sitting with some test tubes and he's making some combinations. So all for the new creation. So we think it's all a magic, but behind the magic there is a logic, and we don't understand the logic because the threads of that logic are held back by the creator. So it's a fascinating process. And so one of the things may be means of producing new beings without going through the old animal method. And Sri Aurobindo says that we know in ancient India, that there were rishis whose blessings could, have a woman could have a child by the blessings of the rishi. And I will not mention any detail, but I have one experience of one child at least like that, where there was no physical process involved. And somebody would obviously, in our modern mind, start doubting and all this kind of thing. But they are things. And actually, it is not very difficult to understand. If you understand the power of consciousness, ultimately it forms things. So, what's going to happen? Things which may define our present understanding. Obviously, it is illogical as of today. But the illogic of today is the logic of tomorrow. I mean, as he says, the impossible is the God's sign of things to be. So, cloning, for example, was illogical and impossible that through a skin cell you can have a baby in the laboratory. So, without going through the old animal method, and why this is important? Because sexual reproduction, there is a great loss of material, and Sri Aurobindo says it's a. And very interesting, we have these suggestions in our own, like Pradyumna. Pradyumna is something like that, if I'm not mistaken. He is directly, and he grows up suddenly. So there have been instances of that kind of birth which go through directly without Pandavas for that matter. So there are processes which we don't know. We should not take that arrogant scientific attitude, no, it's impossible. We should say it's possible, maybe we don't know the process. And these beings who will have a truly spiritual birth will constitute the elements of the new race, the supramental race. They will only constitute the elements. And very interesting. Why? Because their bodies will not go through the degrading process of the sexual process, direct manifestation. And at one place the mother says that there will be bodies which are ready, and it's possible that evolved beings will switch into these bodies which are made ready. So, very interesting this whole subject is. So she says that there would be beings who will come without the old animal method, and these beings who will have a truly spiritual birth will constitute the elements of the new race, the supramental race. So we could call Superman those who, in their origin, still belong to the old method of generation. That means who have been born through the normal sexual process. But in their achievement are in conscious and active contact with the new world of supramental realization. Very simple. All were born, and again, see, very interesting, in the whole Mahabharata, who are the people who survive ultimately in the end? Among those who battle, I mean, leaving aside those Kripacharya and few others, 18 had survived. But look, ultimately the kingdom passed on to these 5 Pandavas. Karna, of course, fell off. Otherwise, these 5 who had been born through a kind of not a clear-cut physical intervention process, because Pandu was cursed, so he could not have had physical relation. And then the other survivor who continues the race is Parikshit, who dies in the womb and is revived. So these are very interesting things to contemplate upon. So, who is the Superman? So we could call Superman those who, in their origin, still belong to the old method of generation, but in their achievement are in conscious and active contact with the new world of supramental realization. This new perception is asserting itself more and more becoming more and more natural. And it is even sometimes difficult to recapture the old way of being as though it were vanishing into a misty past, something which is on the point of ceasing to exist. This is a common experience of many who take to the yoga. That way of life suddenly drops off from inside. You find it very strange, very odd. You even wonder that how you could connect with it. Of course, I say it humorously, like Gadha on the Ghoda. Okay, so with band Vaja Bharat. So it seems so strange. So there was a world like that. Still there is a world like that where people do this. But many things, even family relations, blood relations, they just drop off. Why? Because these ties are with the physical consciousness. And people don't understand why this is happening. Many youngsters are this happening. They don't understand. And the parents don't understand. Sometimes they feel that, they are going stray, but they are not going stray. They are going straight. Because this is the demand of the new creation. You have to leave behind the past forms, past ways of connecting with the divine. As I said, even those past forms, through certain rituals, through certain prayer, worship, they are great things in the old creation. But in the new creation, it is not these. It is thirst for the divine, opening to the divine, something which we have not really, receptivity, giving, self-giving. And then she says something very interesting in 58. This new realization is proceeding with what one might call a lightning speed. For if we consider time in the ordinary way, only 2 years have passed, a little more than 2 years from the time the supramental substance penetrated into the earth atmosphere to the time the change in the quality of the earth atmosphere took place. If things go on advancing at this speed, it seems more than possible, almost evident, that Sri Aurobindo wrote in a letter in a prophetic announcement, the supramental consciousness will enter a phase of realizing power in 1967. So that substance has entered. It's not just something like an energy. There is a substance, and Sri Aurobindo has described this substance. This substance has the quality of, if you look at it from the point of view of strength, like a diamond. But equally, it is very soft. Both things simultaneously, because supramental is the fusion of, that is the new substance which has entered the earth. And as we have seen on the 1st of January, she spoke about this substance has been accepted by nature. So the children who are going to come, they are all going to be supramental chips inside. So how they will behave, how the nature will react to it, we don't know. So it may seem very odd, strange. At one place he says, I believe the number of mad people are increasing in America. But then she says something very interesting. For the moment it is good. They are breaking the old pattern. So we don't know Bhagwan ki Leela, how it... And repeatedly she says that we can't understand the supramental unless something in us corresponds to that. Okay, so... Okay. So this is on page 325, what I was mentioning. As the beginnings of the supramental life, which must be the next realization in the unfolding of the universe, develop, perhaps not in a very obvious way, but very surely, it becomes more and more obvious that the most difficult way to approach this supramental life is, hold the breath, intellectual activity. What is she saying? I'll read again. It becomes more and more obvious that the most difficult way to approach the supramental life is intellectual activity. It could be said that it is much more difficult to pass from the mental to the supramental life than to pass from a certain psychic emotion in life. Something that is like a reflection, a luminous emanation of the divine presence in matter. To the supramental consciousness, it is much easier to pass from that into the supramental consciousness than to pass from the highest intellectual speculation to any supramental vibration. And one of the experiences of Sri Aurobindo in Alipur jail, where he says that I was brought in contact with those whom in our intellectual pride, we call chotte log. But Sri Krishna Vasudev tells him, these are the people I am going to raise. It's very interesting. He says, these are the people I have brought you in their midst. It's like a sample. See, these are the people I am going to raise. May sound very strange. And we see this with the life of all the avatars. And that's why people often say Odisha has such a movement. Why the movement is there? Even Gujarat for that matter. Some of these places. Why? Because people from the heart, they just connect. And wherever there is, often people ask abroad because also partly, I must say, we who are supposed to be somewhere Vahaks, we have made it so complicated with intellectualization of supermind that one gets undermined, literally. What is supermind? We make diagrams and explains. That's not how. She says if you want to glimpse the supermind, the only way to do it through the psychic door. Then you can glimpse. Now she's saying you can pass into it. Because this is the door where the supramental, when Sri Krishna says in the Gita, I am seated in the heart of every creature. Actually, when he is seated in the heart of every creature and governs this entire creation, what is it? It is the supramental Purusha which is seated there. And this is the direct road rather than going through the mind. Because mind means we are still in only human mind. So many layers after layer. That's why people often find difficult to understand Savitri because, they are too much in the mind. But I have seen people who, most of the people who enjoy Savitri, who read Savitri, interestingly, are those who thankfully are not that kind of hyper-intellectual, who are not judging the poetry and its technique and the lines, but they just connect from deep within. So this is where she reminds us, perhaps it is the word that misleads us. Perhaps it is because we call it supramental that we expect to reach it through a higher intellectual mental activity. But the fact is very different. With this very high, very pure, very noble intellectual activity, one seems to move towards a kind of cold, powerless abstraction. God is like a power somewhere out there. You can't relate. He is a state, something impersonal. But if we read the Purushottama of the Gita, he connects with us. Sri Aurobindo speaks about the divine relating with us, with all of us, individually. So it leads towards it's frozen, an icy light which is surely very remote from life and still further away from the experience of the supramental reality. So this is in the Life Divine Triple Transformation. Sri Aurobindo explains this at great length. That those who approach through the mind, they invariably touch the impersonal. And then when we reach there, it's so difficult to go across. And we see this experience in Savitri, because Sri Aurobindo goes layer by layer. And from the mind, when he leaps into the unknowable, so he encounters the Purusha. And there it's like everything will dissolve. There is nothing like your aspiration, the delight of existence. But because he refuses that kind of Mahanirvan, if you want to call it, dissolution, therefore he stays there with his aspiration, and therefore he says, a heart comes out, a heart of love. Something responds to his aspiration, and then he sees the Divine Mother who is hidden in the heart of that Supreme Purusha. So, in this new substance which is spreading and acting in the world, there is a warmth, a power, a joy so intense that all intellectual activity seems cold and dry beside it. There are ways to get a feel. Where is the supramental acting? So you feel that warmth, Feel that joy. At one place, mother is taken to a world. And she says, everything is there, but something is missing. What is missing? She says, joy. So wherever there is a tendency to finish joy, to kill joy. Of course, joy has many layers and types, but doesn't matter. Joy, love, these are fundamental truths which save a creation. That's why Shubindu says in Savitri, that joy to be, the will to be. So this leads to that kind of abstraction. A frozen and icy light which is surely very remote from life. In this new substance which is spreading and acting in the world, there is a warmth, a power, a joy so intense that all intellectual activity seems cold and dry beside it. And that is why the less one talks about these things, the better it is. My personal criteria used to be this: if at all there is somebody speaking about it, you should feel that touch of joy and love. Otherwise, if it's a pure, dry intellect, explaining things, maybe very logically, but that's not what it is. That core has to be touched. It's a divine who is real, living in contact with us. A single moment. So how to contact the supermind? People say it's a very difficult yoga. That's because we have not really got into it. It's a very, very simple yoga, but it requires something which is so difficult for human nature. So what is so difficult for human nature? She describes a single moment, a single impulse of deep and true love. An instant of the understanding which lies in the divine grace brings you much closer to the goal than all possible explanations. It's like Sapsidi, Sant Gyaneshwar had made the original, that was Mukti Pat, where you ultimately arrive. But it's the transformation part. So here should be where there is love. Suddenly you take a leap. Self-giving. And it could be just a moment. You stand before the mother and wish that all of mine is yours. You take a leap. You want to go through intellectual activity, all right. And on the way there would be snakes, Aghasur, Maghasur and God knows. PhD Sur. I know a lot. So all that ego, arrogance, intellect gives man that food for, unfortunately, because it makes a man feel he is superior. See, it's embedded in us that, a person who has many degrees, he is very superior. And people like to even flaunt it. This unfortunate. But the true superiority, if at all, Mother says that race superiority lies in the psychic being. Why was Indian race superior at one point of time? Not because of that so many Vedantic discourses we have had. No. We had the sense of dharma which springs from the heart. That's what makes a civilization great. This psychic impulse. So she reminds us, and these are her words. I'll read again. A single impulse of deep and true love. She's not even saying toward the divine. Towards creation, towards creatures. It's something which is so powerful. An instant of the understanding which lies in the divine grace. All is the grace, manifestation of grace. Brings you much closer to the goal than all possible explanations. Even a kind of refined sensation, subtle, clear, luminous, acute, which penetrates deep, opens the door for you more than the subtlest explanations. See, this typical example is when you enter the ashram. If you look just outwardly, I had this experience, so I can share. This, what is the temple in Greater Kailash in Delhi? Bahai Mandir. What is it called? Lotus Temple. So I had heard so much. So I went there, like many of us. My own feeling, perceptive to that inner state, and nothing, you just can't feel. I sat on the bench, which is there, you're supposed to sit there and meditate. I said, this is dry as dust. You just can't feel. Building is very impressive. And there are few other places which I am not going to name. Famous places in Delhi. Okay, some people probably understand. Huge temple with everything, high tech, light and sound show and all that, very impressive. You go there, you just can't. You're waiting to feel somewhere, kahin Krishna ka kuch ho jayega, kuch to. And if you are sensitive to that vibration, you will know it. And there are places, ashram, you enter, nothing like a huge fanfare or big. You just enter and you walk through and you stand at the samadhi and you just are bowled over. Why? Logically, nothing so impressive. It's not Italian marble. It's local, desi. And it's not like all white and all this thing. Even you have those boulders to support the tree so that you can't even go around. Very inconvenient if you look at it. But see, that sensation refined. You go there and it looks like you are entering a sanctuary of the Lord. So this is what is more important than all kinds of subtle explanations. And if we carry the experience still farther, it seems that when one comes to the work of transformation of the body, when some cells of the body, more ready than others, more refined, more subtle, more plastic, are able to feel concretely the presence of the divine grace, the divine will, the divine power, this knowledge that is not intellectual but a knowledge by identity. When one feels this in the cells of the body, then the experience is so total, so imperative, so living, concrete, tangible, real, that everything else seems a vain dream. Meaning thereby this entire sensations, life of the senses, we have to work towards refining it. What better way to refine it than the contact of the divine? What we see, what we hear. We normally engage in very crude things, so the senses become more and more crude. But the more refined they get, the better it is to these cells, because they contain imprints, they contain impacts. So, okay, so this is then we can she speaks about the avatar, and she speaks about, I had touched last time, so I won't go into it, that this is the only mother's writings. And of course Sri Aurobindo's, but mother very concretely, she speaks about the first avatar. She doesn't speak of Mat's avatar. All that is later. The divine cast himself into the inconscient. That's what we see on the first page of Savitri. And that is the first avatar, and all avatars emerge from that. And that cleared sometimes all these that Shri Krishna speaks of his many births. So what it means, was he Rama, was he Krishna? What exactly is the origin? And then that's a long subject, but it's so amazing. And she goes and meets this being who is lying in the inconscient. The only place where there is a passing description of it is the Mahabhagavat Puran. So you see there, of course, speaks of Vishnu who has cast himself into that ocean down below and he's sleeping there. So it's very interesting that she speaks about the origin of the avatar. And she puts it like that. It is remarkable that this wonderful being strangely resembles the one. Okay, I'll just touch this experience. If one consciously enters into this inconscient, one can still see there this same marvelous being, still in deep sleep, at the bottom of a very dark cave, and in his sleep there emanated from him prismatic rays of light, which gradually spread into the inconscience and embedded themselves in all the elements of this inconscience, to begin there the work of awakening. And it will continue to do it until the inconscience is no longer inconscient. And it is remarkable that this wonderful being strangely resembles the one whom I saw in vision one day, the being who is at the other extremity, at the confines of form and the formless. But that one was in a golden crimson glory, whereas in his sleep the other being was of a shining diamond whiteness, emanating opalescent rays. In fact, this is the origin of all avatars. And this is where we have in the Vedas the story of the Martand, the eighth son of Aditi, who goes into the cave of darkness, and then he emerges from there slowly, 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 struggling upward. So basically, divine has made a foolproof plan. So it's not only from above, from below also. Pressure is being felt. So we don't have a choice, thankfully. It looks like we have a choice, we don't have a choice. You go within, you will contact him. You go above, you will contact. You don't go anywhere, you will be pulverized from both sides. Or transformed, because these are the only two. In fact, this is the origin of all avatars. He is, so to say, the first universal avatar who gradually has assumed more and more conscious bodies and finally manifested in a kind of recognized line of beings who have descended directly from the Supreme to perfect this work of preparing the universe so that through a continuous progression it may become ready to receive and manifest the supramental light in its entirety. This thing is beautifully described in another way in Sri Aurobindo's Essays on the Gita, where he speaks about the process of avatarhood. That, of course, tomorrow we'll touch in Savitri Bhavan. So then we come to a little bit to the end, and okay, there is a consolation. We must all consolation prize for that. The mother uses the word to console, because he says it's a long journey. To console you, I may tell you that by the very fact that you live on earth at this time, where doesn't matter. Of course, he has said that this is the place where the light is at the intensest, but then it is everywhere. If you live on earth at this time, whether you are conscious of it or not, even whether you want it or not, you are absorbing with the air you breathe this new supramental substance which is now spreading in the earth atmosphere. And it is preparing things in you which will manifest very suddenly as soon as you have taken the decisive step. What is the decisive step? She has said that there should be a consent in the heart, a sincere yes. That's what I want. Not a hesitating yes, maybe, okay, let's see, let's explore. If there is a sincere yes, there it, the decisive step. Okay. So, what is Sri Aurobindo's teaching? We have a lot of lectures on that. What is Sri Aurobindo trying to tell us? Okay. You go to the Samadhi, look at Sri Aurobindo's picture. You come to receive a flower from me. Sit down to a lesson. You do everything you do, but with one question within you: why? It's not just a ritual, a mechanical act. And then, if you ask the question, you receive the answer. Why? Well, the simplest answer is you love Sri Aurobindo, you want to meet him. Simple as that. You feel that this year you feel so deeply connected with the mother. And the mother gives a very interesting answer. Because we don't want life as it is any longer. So it's not enough to just go and sit and come back. We don't want the old way of life. Old way had good things. It had evil things. Both will go. Sri Aurobindo describes that in Kali Yuga, both the high point and the low point both go. You see, at the end of Mahabharata, even the great beings, Bhishma, Drona, everything is washed away. It's a new creation. So many things which we have cherished, of course, things which we have hated. But before going, there is a resurgence. And then or time to time, there will be a resurgence. As they say, in every Satyug, there will be a mini Kali. Either a resurgence of the dark material to be cast away. Or as they say, in every Kali Yuga, there is a little Satyug. Or resurgence of a beautiful time. Again, that also will be cast away. Because the ground has to be made clear. Why? She is planting this aspiration. Because we don't want falsehood and ignorance any longer. Because we don't want suffering and unconsciousness any longer. Because we don't want disorder and bad will any longer. Because Sri Aurobindo has come to tell us essence of the teaching. It is not necessary to leave the earth to find the truth. It is not necessary to leave life to find one's soul. It is not necessary to give up the world or to have limited beliefs in order to enter into relation with the divine. And really, some of these children I have seen a child playing football in some place in meditation hall not meditation hall but study hall. Mother Sri Aurobindo's picture was there. This 5-year-old child, ashram bred, not so well mannered. So, play, doing that. Somebody said, no, this is not what you do here. So he said, this is my connection with the mother, period. What do you say to that? So he also was stunned. I was also stunned. I said, yes, I know, but you can connect with the mother through the football, maybe in other space. So I had to explain like that. He said, this is my connection with the mother. Your connection is through meditation. Fair enough. I am not disturbing your meditation. You don't disturb me by playing football. So I said, yes, I appreciate that. Only thing is that to connect to the mother through that, there is a playground there. Okay, that part is understood. But you can't start doing sacred and profane, holy activity when people will sit quietly and meditate. Oh, that is all worldly life. No. He's saying limited beliefs in the divine is everywhere, in everything. This is the most consoling. People often say, when we travel, we are alone. Sometimes we are traveling through all kinds of difficulties, situations, problems. Problem is part of life's puzzle. No? So what is the real thing? The real thing is He is with us. He is the friend who never fails. I think apart from Krishna, I don't know of anyone other than Mother and Sri Aurobindo who gave to humanity their friendship, their motherhood, their fatherhood, playmate, everything. Mother has played tennis and taken people towards that glory. So just with this truth, if we can live, the divine is everywhere, in everything. And if He is hidden, it is because we do not take the trouble to discover Him. Simple. So what is the trouble required to discover Him? Mother, what is the special meditation? You please tell us, because we are always looking for that M word, magic word, meditation word. But the M word here is Mother. So she says, how we can discover Him? She is not saying that, but she is not raising this question. But she is logically proceeding to discover. We do not take the trouble to discover Him. We can simply by a sincere aspiration open a sealed door in us and find that something which will change the whole significance of life, reply to all our questions, solve all our problems, and lead us to the perfection we aspire for without knowing it, to that reality which alone can satisfy us and give us lasting joy, equilibrium, strength, life, basically to form a living relation with her. How to form a just that sincere aspiration, to treat her as a living reality. She is here and everywhere, and one just needs that little opening to connect. And this is an example of so many people, at least I know of. You have heard it. Oh, there are even some here who are so used to it that for them it seems to be the same thing as drinking a glass of water or opening a window to let in the sunlight. The starting point to want it, truly want it, to need it. The next step, to think above all of that. Yoga made easy, not complicated. How I should start the yoga, whether I am on the path or not path, simply wherever we are, to aspire, to want. And then to, when thoughts will come in 100 directions, tell them, look here, don't distract your businesses. And it naturally happens. When you love somebody, you don't make an effort to think. So she says, to think above all of that. A day comes very quickly when one is unable to think of anything else. How beautiful that day would be. That is the one thing which counts. And then one formulates one's aspiration. Let the true prayer spring up from one's heart. It's not a standardized prayer for all times. Let it spring from inside. At a day, how many times a day? There's a mother's prayer, sometimes morning prayer, afternoon prayer, evening prayer, all kinds of prayers. Such a joy to connect with her anytime. Sometime when you see life as it is, I remember in a medical college sitting there, and it called me for selecting someone. And I was sitting and I was looking at the whole thing. I was saying, Mother, when will all this collapse? What is this nonsense? I can't connect with it. As a doctor, I can't connect with that kind of life. So I'm just sitting there and I'm wondering, Mother, what is all this? So she inspired me to write a piece. So I sat there, and while waiting, I was writing for the candidate. I was writing something. Because you can connect with her anywhere. When we look at the world around, we can always pray. The joy of praying is given to human beings. And then she says, the prayer which expresses the sincerity of the need. And then, well, one will see what happens. So, last part now. The last talk of 1958. But before that, something she says very interesting. Again, that there will be many intermediary steps between man and the supramental being. So who are these intermediaries? Are they living in Auroville? Are they living in ashram? Are they having golden hair? Are they radiating light from their skin? Who are these intermediaries? So she says a hint. Question is, sweet mother, will there not be any intermediary states between man and Superman? Mother says, there will probably be many. She's talking of man and Superman. Then she says, all those who strive to overcome their ordinary nature, all those who try to realize materially the deeper experience which has brought them into contact with the divine truth. What brought us in contact with Mother and Sri Aurobindo? What happened? What did we see? What did we feel? All those who, instead of turning to the beyond or the highest, try to realize physically, externally, the change of consciousness they have realized within themselves, all are apprentice Superman. Each time we try not to be an ordinary man, not to live the ordinary life, to express in our movements, our actions and reactions the divine truth. When we are governed by the truth, instead of being governed by the general ignorance, we are apprentice Superman. And according to the success of our efforts, well, we are more or less able apprentices, more or less advanced on the way. So, self mastery, not just reacting like anyone else in the ways of ignorance, how everybody acts and reacts, not to flow with that, but just to feel inside the deeper truth, just to remember that we are representing Mother and Sri Aurobindo. I think that itself is a big thing. Okay, so now we come to the end. This is the last talk. That's why I just want to end with that. What does she say in the end? She spoke about all those who strive to master, but what ordinary life is. In fact, the vast majority of men are like prisoners, page 430, with all the doors and windows closed. So they suffocate. This is a disease which comes very commonly. As a psychiatrist, I meet people who say we are suffocated. Unfortunately, they feel I am suffocated because my husband. Husband says I am suffocated because of my wife. No, sir. You are suffocated because you have closed your doors and windows to that light. If you open, then it doesn't matter. So this is how she says they feel suffocated. This is a quite common thing which is happening nowadays. Youngsters, they come with, I feel stifled in my environment. Basically, they're seeking for something else. They don't know what they're seeking for. Sometimes they go into drugs and all this. Because they're seeking for something, but they don't know what they are seeking. So they break away, they revolt, and of course this is a whole subject. Nowadays we use the word spiritual emergency for many of these. So they suffocate, which is quite natural, but they have with them the key that opens the doors and windows, and they do not use it. Certainly there is a time when they don't know they have the key, but long after they have come to know it, long after they have been told about it, they hesitate to use it and doubt whether it has the power to open the doors and windows, or even that it is a good thing to open them. She is talking in the ashram context. And it applies everywhere. People have been told, they have been given the key. See how simple it is with aspiration, with opening. It's nothing difficult. I have met people who say, no, I met a lady who came to my office in Jorhat and she cried and cried. She had come to consult, but she started crying. 2 hours she was crying. And I was a bit worried. And what happened to you? What is the problem? No, problem is with my son. So why are you crying? He says, those books which I see on the shelf. I say, what about those books? He says, 20 years back, I was gifted these books, the Hindi set. I never read it, but suddenly when I saw, I felt that I wasted my life. She had not come for that problem at all. She was crying that I did not read. So this is what happens, that everything is there. Mother and Sri Aurobindo have given so much actually. Photographs, music, everything. Books, of course, and of course, they created a place called ashram. And even when they feel that after all, it might be good, there remains some fear. What will happen when these doors and windows are open? On themselves, people I've seen who pass assessment, I don't think I am ready for this. I am ready for this yoga. I said, you must be God to decide you are ready or not ready for the yoga. We can say, I don't have the aspiration, that I understand. But if you have the aspiration, who is fit, who is unfit before the divine grace? And they are afraid. They are afraid of being lost in that light and freedom. They want to remain what they call themselves. That's what Sri Aurobindo says in God's labor. Curb of his wide, white peace. Oh, also in Savitri, hard is the world Redeemer's heavy task. Hard is to persuade earth's nature's change. So it doesn't like that sweetness and absolute voice. They like their falsehood and their bondage. Something in them likes it and goes on clinging to it. They still have the impression that without their limits they would no longer exist. Of course, you can't after that have an identification with all that we proudly flaunt on our card and this and that. But you get a new identity. But people are afraid of that. That is why the journey is so long. That is why it is difficult. For if one truly consented to cease to exist, everything would become so easy, so swift, so luminous, so joyful. Means no other identity except the mother, with the mother. Mother's child, mother's portion, call it whatever. But perhaps not in the way men understand joy and ease. In truth, there are very few people who do not enjoy fighting. I had some time back some people who came, there's so much fighting in my house. I said, every house people fight. I said, why? I said, because people are stupid. What else? I said, they enjoy fighting. What else can we say? They fight. And there is no reason to fight. They said, yes, there is no reason to fight. I said, exactly. But they fight. They can't. Even people say, if you don't fight, there is no real love. This is the strangest logic I have heard. Arey, we fight because we love each other. Arey, what is this weird logic? But that's how humanity is like that. Fight. Unless you have to find a reason. Ego has to feel. If you are not fighting, are you okay? Bukhar hai kya? Are you okay? So everything is fine. You can't be quiet. So she says, they fight. There are very few who could escape the absence of night, except the absence of night. Few can conceive of light except as the opposite of darkness. So they need to go into darkness. They need to, quarrel to understand the value of peace, which is unfortunate. It should not be like that. But that's how. Without shadows, there would be no picture. Without struggle, there would be no victory. Without suffering, there would be no joy. But this is not what Mother wants. Mother wants us to move from joy to greater joy, from peace to greater peace, from strength to greater strength, from knowledge to greater knowledge, from freedom to greater freedom, from love to greater love. Not through the shadows. That's what supramental evolution should be. That is what they think, and so long as one thinks in this way, one is not yet born into the spirit. This is the last of the Wednesday evening classes given at the ashram playground. Jai Ma.